There is good amount of displeasure with Biden's handling of the Hamas-Israel war, but this isn't the only crisis that has backfired for him. President Joe Biden took office promising to restore competence and credibility in U.S. foreign policy. But over the last 4 years, several missteps and crises abroad have undermined his claim. Questions are mounting about his handling of the world affairs and wars. From the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan to the Russia-Ukraine conflict and now the Israel-Hamas war. As the Russia-Ukraine war drags on with no end in sight, it is important to look at US President Joe Biden's miscalculations in Ukraine. The Biden administration took steps to deter Russian President Putin from attacking Ukraine, including imposing rounds of sanctions. However, those actions failed to stop Putin. In February 2022, Russia started a full-scale bombardment of Ukraine from multiple directions. The United States has provided $43 billion in support to Ukraine. Covering everything from Javelin missiles to tanks and ambulances to long-range strike missiles and air defense capabilities. Secretary of Defense Lloyd J. Austin III formed and still leads the Ukraine Defense Security Group that now has 50 nations contributing to Ukraine's defense. The aid is key to helping Ukrainian forces take on and in many areas push back the Russians. Despite over 2 years of military badgering by Russia, Ukraine's NATO membership remains a distant dream. While the US is leading the Western nations in helping Ukraine fight back, it also seems to be ruining Kyiv's prospects to become a full member of the military alliance. The US is reportedly worried that strengthening bonds with Ukraine during the war could fuel Putin's narrative of a battle between Russia and NATO itself, and that Moscow may escalate the conflict, including by potentially deploying nuclear arms. However, the brutal images of Russia's invasion of Ukraine has posed the bigger question. Why isn't the United States doing more to stop Russia in its war against Ukraine? Can one ever forget the haunting images that marked the end of America's 20-year war in Afghanistan? Images of Afghans crowding an airport runway after the fall of Kabul to the Taliban in August 2021. Afghans running after a US Air Force plane, hanging on to it as it took off, and some tragically falling to their deaths. Those images reflected the chaos, the dread of the Taliban that foretold the events of the days that followed. The big picture was the ignominy of the war that ended with the return of the Taliban 20 years after America removed it from power. Taliban's takeover in August 2021 meant greater restrictions on Afghan women's mobility, their presence in public, access to education, and the right to work. The country is now on the brink of a humanitarian catastrophe, with millions facing acute food insecurity. So, what went wrong for the US in the Afghan pullout? Last year, the Biden administration released an after-action review of the US withdrawal. In the document, the Biden administration acknowledged that it should have started the 2021 evacuation of Afghanistan sooner, while placing much of the blame for the chaotic U.S. departure from the country on the Trump administration. The report blamed the former President Donald Trump for signaling a flawed peace deal, also called the Doha deal, that President Joe Biden inherited. It blamed the intelligence community for failing to foresee the spread of the Afghan military's collapse. It blamed the Afghan government for failing to take measures that might have delayed defeat. The report did not, however, acknowledge mistakes on the part of current senior American leaders or the president himself. The U.S. retreat took place 8 months into President Joe Biden's tenure. While Biden pledged to return stability to the world stage as president, the bungled U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021 shattered public confidence, and his approval ratings never recovered. Reportedly, his foreign policy approval rating is at a net negative 16 percentage points. According to an average of recent polls, 56% disapprove and only 40% approve of his policies.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
The Biden administration took charge in January 2021, promising to bring back competence and professionalism in foreign affairs. In sharp contrast to the Trump era, Biden's administration brought an element of seriousness to U.S. foreign policy making, but all its efforts haven't been successful. The gruesome attacks by Hamas on the 7th of October, followed by Israel's protracted and devastating response in Gaza, brought Biden's non-strategy crashing down. It revealed the lack of foresight that has now catapulted the region into the low-level state of conflict it is in today. Biden not only failed to deter Iran, but actually emboldened the regime. Iran has dramatically expanded operations against the United States, aided the Hamas in its attacks against Israel, and supported the Houthis in their attacks on international commerce in the Red Sea. The decision of Iran to retaliate against an Israeli attack reveals just how the Biden administration mishandled the West Asia situation. If Israel is in growing danger today and Iran is emerging stronger, the responsibility lies more in Washington than in Tehran.
I think the United States is quite worried about this escalation. It has been warning Israel right from the beginning, and one of the reasons is it's an election year in the United States, and I think it's quite worrying for Joe Biden to have to inform the American public that the United States is now involved in a war, not because it chose to get involved, but because its ally Israel has, in a sense, drawn it in. I think that would be a hard sell for a lot of how Biden would have to frame this.
A proliferation of crises has raised serious doubts about Biden's ability to manage international emergencies. How the U.S. plans to protect its interests in West Asia is certainly a test for Biden and his team.